A lot of times people reach deep within, and what they pull out, it's a false fantasy of what they want to be. It's not who they are. You should try to do something difficult every day. You're supposed to care about everything, but it's always an inch deep. So many people today are so scared to just go because what if? I'm like, what if?
Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It's your girl, Breezy. And usually around this point in time, we'd have to do a couple of takes because we're singing songs or goofing around, because naturally that's what you do when you get a mic. But we're a little serious today.
We are serious because we are recording this in front of a live studio audience. Can we get some love today? Yeah. So it's exciting. We are here, as many of you guys know, we're here at our Mondays at TBD. Bree, you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, so on the podcast, we've mentioned before how Adrian is also the lead pastor to Engage Church in Tallahassee. So we are actually at Mondays at TBD. Can we give another round of applause for our college students? Incredible. So we are super excited for this episode. Today we are going to talk about chasing smoke.
Chasing smoke. It's going to be a lot of fun. So let's get into it.
Yeah, so to start us off, as always, can you kind of give us the genesis of the topic? What kind of brought this onto your mind?
Yeah, it was a couple years ago. I found myself kind of like dissatisfied where I was at actually in life. And it was interesting because I had everything that ultimately I dreamed of at that current time. Like I said, been married at that current time. I had been married for like 19 years. I had, 3 very healthy children, good kids. And we had moved into our dream home. I appreciate that. You know what I'm saying? Black man. And so we had moved to our dream home, all this stuff, but I still found myself discontent. And what I started to realize was that how easy it was that I started drifting to finding that that actual satisfaction and things would come into the stuff. I didn't mean to, but it would actually be in the stuff, or just influence or impact and things like that. And I started kind of going down this place of why is life like that? And then, I started doing a deeper study into it and realizing that even in corporate America, 34% is really job satisfaction. It's kind of been that way for Gallup for the last 20 years, which is crazy that there's been no better that 34% of people who are in the workforce actually enjoy their job. And it's kind of been consistent. And I begin to think, is it because there's only 30% of good companies and 70% suck? I don't think that's the case. I think it's just the fact that most people become discontent because they actually don't know what actually they're supposed to do or how to measure success in life. And so that's why I begin to go on this whole dive of chasing smoke.
I think we all love hearing a little bit more about your story. So how old were you whenever you started to realize that you were feeling a little bit disillusioned?
Yeah, I was, I've always had
a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, but honestly, back in the 1900s, but no, dang, yeah, woo, all right, anyway, but no, I would tell you this, this was this new thought came a couple years ago, but I realized when I started tracing back, it had started even when I was in college. When I was in college playing basketball at Florida State, I was living the dream. I was discontent. And then I went to play professional basketball. Then I found myself discontent. Then I went on and I started my first business that I always wanted to do. I was discontent. Then I got into my age. I was around 37, 38. I sold my first business. And that's what everybody wants to do. Every founder wants to get to a place of selling it. I found myself in that moment discontent. So it's kind of been an evolution through just different phases of my life.
I think that we hear a lot, especially us younger, about what it means to chase after something that's not realistic, or what it feels like to be discontent and having too many access points and all of these ideas of comparison, that it almost starts to water down a little bit what it actually feels like. Because whenever we feel discontent inside, it's pretty tormenting. So can you share a little bit more in detail and describe what it was like for you to come to that point in your life?
Yeah, I think it was this. It's actually even that whole idea and concept of chasing smoke. Actually, it comes from, there's a book in the Bible written by King Solomon called Ecclesiastes. And one of the things that he says, he talks about in there, it's a very sad book because he said life is meaningless. It's all meaningless. And that word meaningless simply is this. It's the word of all, which means it's like smoke. smoke. And the reason why I started thinking about chasing smoke and how I felt about discontent is because I felt in life I was always trying to grasp something that I couldn't. It was like I was like literally trying to grab smoke in the air. And it just, the feeling was that it was just, as soon as I would get to that next place, it was like, what's the next place? As soon as I got there, I thought I had an expectation of what it would feel like or what it would be or how I would, this my emotionality in it. And when I got to those places, I found myself not like, oh man, I was like so happy and excited. I found myself just kind of sad. I felt literally empty. I felt like these things were like, you literally were trying to grasp something that I thought was going to fulfill, and actually it didn't. And the truth be told is that I think I live more on purpose than most people, but it's so easy to drift and start measuring your life in a different way.
You're pretty open about your emotionality and experiencing high highs and low lows. So to experience a low like that, what was it like for your wife? What was it like for your kids? Or even more, what was it like to be a husband and to be a dad?
Yeah, I think that when I would face lows like that, it was always difficult because you always had, I have children. Like my son's here tonight, and it's like, man, like I had to still be on, because, my kids, there was an again, understandably so. I didn't want that weight to be on them. Wendy, my wife, has been a soldier through it all, because one of the things that she's done is that she's been on the roller coaster with me. And she's been on the ride, and she just always told me, it's like, she's my ride or die. She's like, I'm not going to get off, and we're going to figure this thing out. And so it was, I think at times, then you would feel, for me personally, when I would get to these moments, I would start to feel a little bit of like, I would start to feel like bad, because I'm like, how am I really leading my family if I'm in such this place? How can I speak about encouragement to my kids unless these things happen here? And so that was kind of the process. So it would kind of leave me in a place of shame a little bit.
How did you start to redefine the scoreboard?
Yeah, I think that most of the times, most people don't even have a scoreboard in life. I think if you really look at it, if you ask somebody, what does it mean to actually be successful in life? They can't answer that. They think it's money. It usually goes by whatever society actually tells you is success. So influencers, going viral, making money, having a certain whatever the stuff is, that's how you measure success. And what I begin to realize is that because of even the work that I do and the people I'm around, I've been very fortunate. I've been around really, really good people in different things. Like I said, I was in high school, playing and competing against Kobe. So I'm against one of the best. I played against Michael Jordan. So in the basketball world, I've been into those things. I have some of my closest friends. My 3 closest friends in college were the 3rd pick, 4th pick, and the 6th pick in the NFL draft. And so people being really good there, and then I got into the business space, and then being around people who sold companies at young ages, so on and so forth. And what I started to realize is that everyone was always going to have more than you. People were going to make more money than you. People were going to have more influence than you. Somebody was going to be better looking than you. Somebody's going to all these things. But the truth be told is that, so I had to start realizing what actually was the scoreboard. And when I was honest, I didn't even know what it meant. I just knew I was dissatisfied and didn't even know what it meant to win. And I just go through life, and I think most people go through life and they have no idea what it actually means for them to win. And so, and I think that's why a lot of people, and especially right now, I think it's leading to a lot of the mental health crisis that's happening right now. It's because people they don't feel like they're there, but they can't define what is there. They can't define what does it mean to actually feel like they're actually winning in life. Because what we've been told is like, man, just be your authentic self, which normally has been told to reach deep within. Whatever you pull out, that's what you are. But what that's leading to is people are being whatever they feel like they should be, and yet they're still discontent. And so what I had to start doing is say, what actually did it mean for me to actually win? And it was really coming down to the idea of my faith being very centered to that, really asking God, what did you design me for? And actually, what was I put here for, and what was I called to do? So it became more living out of a calling and purpose than anything else.
So the idea of reaching within and us defining who we are, is that harmful? Like, why is that bad?
Because a lot of times people reach deep within, and what they pull out is it's a false fantasy of what they want to be. It's not who they are. I mean, I can say all day long that I want to, I don't know, freaking look like whoever, you know what I'm saying? Like Michael B. Jordan or Ryan Gosling, but I can't, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can, whatever. And I think people want to do that, and and it's not you. You know what I'm saying? Like when you try to live a fake, faulty life, it just brings a greater disintegration in your life. And so you have the false you and you have the real you. But unfortunately, what ends up happening, people live so much in the false you that they become so disconnected from actually who they're supposed to be that they can never recover the distance. And actually the false you becomes you, and you go through life literally being a counterfeit. I can't tell you how many people I work with who live life completely as counterfeits.
Sometimes I personally, I feel like the structures of the world are really against helping me build the internal structures needed to have the resilience to remain who I am. Like, I feel like I just have so much access to people's opinions and people telling me what it is that I should care about. What's kind of your take on that, especially because most of us in this room are younger? What are the things that you think are, I guess, kind of at war against our minds and our souls?
Yeah, I mean, here's the truth about it. For all of you that are in here, everybody, I mean, listen, everything in society today is trying to sell you an identity. They're trying to give you an identity. So the algorithm just wants to give you an identity. You actually think it just knows you. It's like, no, it's just telling you who they want you to be. And so I think what ends up happening with that is that we become so connected. You know, think about right now. I mean, as we're recording this, we're in the middle of, we're coming to the end, thank God, of this political season. But you know what I'm saying? But like, I mean, just think about this. I mean, like I say it all the time. I mean, the level, like yesterday, I went to my mailbox. And my mailbox was filled with flyers. And I'm literally like...
In those text messages?
In those text messages. I'm like, dog, yeah, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, yo...
Every hour.
They keep hitting me. I'm like, they keep hitting me. I'm saying, listen, Donald Trump and Kamala both hitting me for like, yo,
Opt out.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Stop.
yo, give $5, give me $5, give me $10, give me, you know what I'm saying? And so here's the thing with all that is that you're doing all this stuff and again, and they're trying to tell you, if you don't vote for this person, you hate this. If you vote for this person, you hate this. And it's people trying to tell you what you should do and define you. And I think because they try to do that now, people don't know how to go through life, and then we don't know how to think for ourselves. And so what ends up happening is, so it's like, oh, if you, and again, I'm using politics, but like, yeah, if you vote Democrats, vote Democratic, then, on the other side, it's, oh, you must hate babies and you hate whatever. And then if you vote right, then you hate immigrants. And I'm just like, it's stupid. Because at the end of the day, like, you should be a functioning adult and can make whatever decisions you want to. And I think today, with all these access points, most people think they're very real. Most of you in this room think that you're actually incredibly, I'm authentic to myself, whatever, and honestly, you're not. Most people are telling you that. They're pushing you to do that. Because if all of a sudden, when you start getting people to stand out and stand up, I'll say this on this podcast, one of my best friends in the entire world, we've been friends for 25 years, is running he's a Republican senator. And people are thinking I'm crazy, that I can't believe you would, can't believe you'd do this. He's a black man running, he's an Uncle Tom, all this stuff like that. And I'm like, I've been rocking with him for 25 years. Like, what do you think? We got out the mud together, and I'm going to be there with him now. I don't care about what's there. That's my friend. I know what he's doing and what he's about. But here's the thing. Some people wouldn't do that. Because why? Because if anybody said, oh, man, like, oh, you're rocking with somebody like this, I'm like, they'd be like, oh, you can't believe it as a black man. I don't care. I do not care about that stuff, because at the end of the day, I don't give an account for anybody for my life. And I think a lot of you live a life where you're more worried about what everyone else is going to think about that, and what you'll end up doing is making no impact. I see it all the time. People make no impact because they're more worried about the other voices than actually understanding actually doing something that's actually meaningful in the world.
It's almost like we want somebody to tell us who we should be, though. Like, we almost we want to be relieved of, or I'll speak for myself. Like, there are times where I'm like, please just tell me, please tell me what I should do with my life. Please tell me what I should do so that I don't have to carry the weight of making the decision or accounting the cost. Where do you think that comes from, and how do you think that we can best navigate it?
Because I think human beings long to know. I think there's a good thing in that. Human beings long to want to know what they've been made to do, why they were put here. I think there's a deep part of our hearts that want to know that. And so because of that, that's why I think there's that desire for you to want to do that. But then it's like, but we all in a very quick microwave age of things, instant access. Again, the rise of Chat GPT. I mean, it's amazing, right? I mean, if you want this, you get this, you type it in, you prompt it well, you get what you want, just like that. You know, and I'll get back to this. The other day, I did something. I was like working on a financial thing for real estate, and something that would have taken like 2 weeks. I literally did the whole prompt, blah, 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 walked to the kitchen or office, heated up a brownie, walked back. And by the time I got back, I had this whole full thing of of here's square footage price, here's this, and this, and it was unreal. My point is this: now, because of those things, we want everything instant, and especially understand what we're called to do. But the truth be told, especially right now in your 20s, most of the time in your 20s, you're not going to find that. You have to just start to begin the journey of unearthing it and moving in that direction. And so I think that's why people just tell me, because if it alleviates it. But here's the other thing too, then if somebody tells you and it doesn't work out, it's very easy just to blame it on the person who told you versus carrying responsibility for it.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point, because I'm 25, and there are often times where I feel this pressure to know, like, who am I fully, and what do I want to do? And I also feel like in so many different conversations, like community, people are just asking me in a lot of different words and different ways, who are you and what are you going to do with your life? And I kind of feel that pressure. How do you think that we can best actually discover that? Like, what are the skills that we need to be practicing every day to learn who we are?
Yeah, I think the first thing is this: you have to learn how to be honest with yourself. One of the things that I teach my kids to do, I talk to those around me to do, is a couple things. One is that we like to call dump the box. Like, where I do this almost every day. Sometimes I do it twice a day, where I'm actually really honest about where I'm at. Like, genuinely honest. I mean, the dark thoughts that you have, you know, the ones that just swirl around in your head that really just stay there. A lot of times what I do is I just will go, and I just voice it out loud, if I pray, whatever, I just get it out. And the reason why is because I have to consistently learn how to be honest with myself, because no one, you've heard me say it the other day, no one lies to you more than you. And so because of that, you need to learn how to be able to be truthful and be able to constantly communicate that. So that's one. The second thing I can do is this: you have to learn how to become an expert at asking yourself questions. One of the things that really changed my life was I began to ask myself why. The power of why is one of the most important things. So when I begin to do things, I would say, why? Like, why did that bother me? Or why do I like this? You know, like I play, again, I'm old, right, Bri? You always say that. And so being, seasoned in my life, I still play video games, right? Like, I love 2K. And one of the things about playing NBA 2K, I used to always wonder, like, why when I played 2K, I'm playing a digital video game, y'all. Like, it's not real. But I literally, in my mind, I'm playing a franchise, and I'm thinking about the emotional state of my digital players as I'm playing. Like, I didn't play him enough, but he's probably mad and pissed off right now. This is a real thing. And because they're saying, it's because, so I started realizing, but one day I stopped myself. I was like, why do I do that? Like, why? And it literally was a self-discovery thing for me, because what I started to realize in that moment was that, man, wanting people to actually be aware and know their emotionality, whatever. I was doing with a digital video game, and that was just my life. And it led me to realize a lot of the work that I actually do now is that I literally go in with teams and things like that, and I just help them unearth where they actually are. And so I think the power of why. When you feel insecure, why? When you're watching something on TV, why? Why? What? You know what I'm saying? Like, when you're watching certain reels, why? What are the things, and why do you do that? And I think if you can start learning how to reframe that, because I think great leaders, that's the biggest thing. What you realize is that, when I've worked with high performing people, they reframe questions. It's not it's not really man, what do I have to do to be the best? They actually ask the question, what am I capable of? They ask the question. It's not that. They're not limited to, I just want to be this. No. What am I capable of? I want to know the ends. I want to constantly push to be there. And so I think if you can learn how to just be honest with yourself and start asking yourself why, I think it begins to help you start to self-discover.
How did you learn to be more honest with yourself? Because we all have been taught to filter so much, and we hit a point to where we're starting to filter within ourselves as well. So how did you practice that?
Yeah, I learned it, honestly, when I started therapy when I was 33. So it was a while ago. Again, I'm 46, so it was 13 years ago, and I started therapy, and I was in it for 3.5 years. And that was the first thing, for some of the people in here know Dr. Mike Zoda. And one of the things that Doc told me was that when he went in there and I first started meeting with him, within a few minutes of being in there, he was like, I take that back. It was within a couple weeks being there. He started saying this. He was like, you have one of the highest EQs of people I've ever worked with, but you are so disconnected from your head and your heart. You will do what's right. You know what's right. But your heart does something completely different, though. Your head knows what's right, but your heart is not connected to that. And so in that, truth and being honest begins to connect and shrink the gap. That's the greatest distance in a human right now. The greatest distance is their head and their heart. And I think a lot of people, like they live up here and they may even do what's right or because how it be perceived, but deep in their heart's so disconnected from where they are. And what he wanted me to do is to bridge that gap. And so that's kind of how I started doing it. It's just because I wanted to not live a disconnected life, and especially in my faith, because I realized that I didn't think that this belief that I have was meant for me to have it to live a disintegrated life, to live like I'm one person here, one person there. I don't believe that's what it was. And to be honest with you, the more you study it, that isn't a Greek thought. Hebrew thought is not like sacred, secular. It's just everything's sacred. And we're actually called to live that. But a lot of times our world are built to have those separate worlds that way.
What's the scoreboard to your life?
Scoreboard to my life, honestly, is to help people. It's to unlock authenticity. And how I define authenticity is self-awareness, being resilient, to remain self-aware, and empowering others. And so that's how I define it. And so I feel like everything I do in my life is motivated by that. And a lot of ways I do that is by helping people write new rules to what they do. So I help people think differently, because I tell people you're going to play by rules. You're going to play by a set of rules. The question, are you playing by the right rules for the game you're meant? Do you actually know what the scoreboard is? Because some of us out here, we're looking to score points like it's a football game, but actually you're playing soccer. And so you're frustrated that you don't have more points on the board, but you were never meant to have that many points on the board because you're playing a different game. And so I just love helping people do that, and I find the most life doing it. So if it could be from CEOs to, to high school students to the idea of working with professional athletes, I just love to get to do it.
How do you steward your talents well? Because sometimes it feels like we all have to have this massive impact, or maybe it's that we really want to have this massive impact, but we aren't quite sure if we really are supposed to. So how do you make sure that you're sorting what you have well?
I realize this: I'm not responsible for the world. I'm not responsible for the world that I like. How big of a world that I get. What I am responsible for is the idea of like the world I do get. Am I taking care of that? So how do I steward? What's in my hands? That's one of the greatest ways you steward things is, what do you have in your hands? Are you being consistent and faithful with the things that you actually have in your hands? And I think if you do that, then the results are the results. You know what I'm saying? I tell people the work's the work. Talent, and let's be really clear, talent ain't equal. It's just not. You know what I mean? Like Elon Musk, whatever your thoughts are about him, let me tell you right now, his brain power is just not equal to a lot of people. I've actually had people who work with Elon, and they'll tell you this. Like, his brain computing power is just it's unmatched. LeBron James, yeah, his talent level is different. But I tell people it's not about that. It's about what you do with what you have, and then max that out. And I think most people struggle in life because everyone picks that person out there. So pick the most noblest thing out there that you want, right? It could be, again, it's like, oh, it's Martin Luther King. Okay, great. Pick out there, it's this artist, it's this tech person, it's whatever. And most of us live out there trying to attain that. And we end up living out here to this place versus understanding who we actually are and bringing that to the world. And I think most people just don't steward well because they're trying to chase this noble thing of whatever that looks like instead of actually being who they actually were designed to be.
Who is the figure that you chased after?
Growing up, Michael Jordan for sure.
He used to have these Michael Jordan posters plastered all over his
I did.
walls.
It was a shrine. It was a shrine. Listen, I mean, I 100% idol worship. I mean, it was it. But you got to meet him and you got to play with him. I did.
And so you had this moment where you're playing and you realized, I will never ever, no matter how hard I work, be as good as Michael Jordan.
Yeah, it was the most disheartening moment ever in my life. Because I'm on the floor with him, and it was like one of those moments where it was so disheartening, but yet and still, it was something that changed me. Why I was so disheartening in that moment was because I'm out there and I'm literally on the floor and I'm like, I don't care how hard I work. I don't care. I will never be this good, ever, 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 ever. And in that moment, that's all you wanted to be like Mike. And then you get out there with Mike, you know what I'm saying? You are measured up against one of one. I mean, he's Black Jesus. And so you're measured up against Black Jesus. And that's what we called him. And so you're measured up against Black Jesus. And you're out there and you're like, oh, yo, he is completely different than the rest of us. And so what I realized, though, was that I couldn't be him. But you know what? How many other people have been in the NBA or have done stuff in life who've made a lot of impact and made a lot of money doing this? And so I had to start realizing who I actually was. And that moment really changed me because I thought my whole dream was to be like that. But then once you realize, oh, I could never be like that, it made me start going into reality. And so, but actually people who I think that, man, like who growing up, he was one. I think since I've gotten into like doing business and things like that, there's just a lot of people that are out there that I've actually really like admired from a distance or whatever. So.
What's that like now? What are the things that kind of push you, even you mentioned with your scoreboard being to unlock authenticity, what are the things that you face every day or the things that kind of get in your ear that keep you from doing that in the way that you're supposed to?
Is trying to compromise, trying to have a short-term success instead of sometimes playing the long game. My life right now is that I'm about building legacy. I'm not about having the most money and things like that, but what I'm pushing forward is this: how do you have the greatest funeral? That you have, you know what? That at the end of my life, I want to have, like, I want to have influenced that many people that my funeral, that there's a lot of people there. Because that means if you're there, the idea that you pay, it won't be out of just, oh, well, you had this kind of power. It was actually, man, the impact that you made. So a lot of my life right now is building legacy. I feel like I'm going to live a very long life. But in that, though, I want to build like legacy that goes beyond like actually, what's here and what's now. I want to build momentum for those who come way behind me, because the truth be told, that's me. I come from a line of great men that came before me. My great-great-grandfather my great-great-grandfather was a slave. My great-grandfather was a pastor. My grandfather was a pastor. My father was the first black head basketball coach at University of Akron. Man, like, they paved the way. I stand on shoulders of great people that allow me to be this. And so I have a responsibility that others will stand on mine. And so that's why, when I see, what we do and we work with the next generation, or even let's say we're Monday, my whole thing is to pave a way, is to be an example. One of the things that kept me going in my life was thinking about, I was called to be an example, to be a forerunner, so other people could actually see that you can live authentic and do this. People from all different walks of life, but also specifically for me, a lot of times for young black men, I wanted that. I wanted them to be able to see that, no, you can wrestle through this, you can be authentically you. You don't have to fit these stereotypes, and that you can run and you actually make it. And so that's kind of one of the things I look to do now, is just really, I want to build my life for just the next generation.
The idea of chasing smoke, so the word chasing, especially now, seems to have such a negative connotation to it. And especially in the church, too, in terms of like biblical references, it's like you shouldn't be really chasing after everything or anything. But when you think of someone like Charles Spurgeon, he most definitely like violently pursued things within his life that cost him deeply. So can you help integrate that a little bit on how we should be thinking about chasing?
Yeah, I think that, listen, the Bible is very clear that all hard work leads to profit. Charles Spurgeon, who she mentioned, is, at his time, he pastored the largest church in the world at that time at 23 years of age. He was someone, by the end of his life, there's 29 different initiatives that started. He was someone who handwrote a sermon every week for 25 years, that the publication, he had Sword and Trial, had publications throughout the world of over 200 million copies. And you're talking before like all the mass production stuff. But my point was this: he died at 59. And one of the things that he talked a ton about was the idea that he felt like with his life, he was called to every single day maximize every day. I think as a follower, I think one of the biggest issues I see, and I know this is kind of different, and so, but like in the church world that I see among young people who are Christians, are this fear of burnout, is that people have so much fear now of burnout that they don't do anything and they're not work. Listen, when you're in your 20s, you should work your face off. You should work incredibly hard. because you learn to build something. You were made to build something. A lot of people stay in trouble is because they aren't tired when they go to bed at night. When I go home, I'm literally exhausted. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the thing, is that we are called, and how you integrate it. I think the Bible's not against hard work. It actually talks a ton about hard work. We should work hard, but here's the difference. But you work your face off, but you trust the results. Those things don't define you. If you are a Christian, you are defined by who Jesus is, or what he's already done for you. That's what defines you. And so because of that, you live out of that. You live out of that freedom of knowing that, man, there's no consequences. I'm not trying to gain access for anything. Let me tell you this, living guilt-free and living like with no hindrances, it should make you run fast. It should make you want to make impact. And so many people today are so scared to just go, because what if? I'm like, what if? Like, what if? Like, I want to see the what if. I want to see somebody I want to see if you'll get burnt out. Well, Pastor, you can't. Yes, try it. I want to see you run. Most of the people think burnout's not about work. You don't ever see blue-collar construction workers talking about they got burnout. Dudes busting concrete all the time. They ain't out there, oh, man, I'm burnt out. No, it's freaking us. It's not. And here's why. It's because burnout isn't about the work. Burnout is about your emotional state. Burnout is about the fact that you don't handle things well. You have too many access points. People get burned out is because all of a sudden, not only are the workload that you carry, but then all of a sudden, you're watching 14 shows. Not only are you watching 14 shows, you listen to 14 podcasts. You half read 5 books. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sorry if I'm stepping on most of y'all's toes in here. And then all of a sudden, you have so much access point that you get overwhelmed emotionally. That's where burnout starts to fry you, is those things. And it's not, you don't handle. The other thing I think, and again, I don't know why I got this, but the idea of burnout too is because most people are codependent. They don't know where they end. So they don't know how to build healthy boundaries. And so, like, this is the reality. As someone who literally experienced burnout, like 100% experienced burnout, like to the fact it literally has rewired my body over the last 3 years that I've been in this, 2 years, I've been in the process going to the Mayo Clinic to literally rewire my body because I got there. And here's the reason why I got to this place of burnout is because I carried so much stuff emotionally for other people. And here's the thing is that I didn't know where I ended and the next person began. And so I've had to learn, one of the greatest ways is to learn how to build boundaries. And so I think a lot of people are getting there is because you all have been taught to care about everything. You're supposed to care about everything, but it's always an inch deep. And so when something happens in Ukraine, we should care about it. Something happens in Gaza, we should care about it. Something happens in Israel, we should care about it. Something happens in Africa, we should care about it. All these things, if you don't care about it, that means you hate those people. And you're like, no, like there's only so much I can care about, right? There's only so much. Doesn't mean my heart doesn't go out. Doesn't mean I don't pray, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to take up those causes because that may not be what I need to do. And so I think a lot of times what we have to do is start to put those proper boundaries in place.
How do you think that we can build more internal structures outside of access points to have greater levels of self-control or resilience?
Do something difficult. You should try to do something difficult every day. Like, you should do something difficult every day. One of the things I try to do difficult every day right now is like, I go to the gym that I'm at and it's like getting in the sauna. Now this sauna is like about 190, 195 degrees. It's awful. And for 20 minutes, I just go in there and just like low. It's like being in hell. So it makes me be very thankful for Jesus every time I go in there. But here's the deal, is that I do it because, again, not because but it's like, it's very difficult. I want to just get out. It feels like you're suffocating half the time that you're in there, but you want to do something difficult. So I think that's one way you build internal fortitude and structure is doing something difficult every day. I think the other way that you build good internal structures, you have to have good community. I can tell you right now, I am who I am because I have incredible friends. And your community helps build you. No, you think about this, no great athlete ever trains alone. They train in groups. The Olympic sprinters don't train alone. They train in groups. Because why? Because they push each other. They help each other. You learn from each other. And so I think one of the biggest ways to do something difficult, and honestly, get a good community around you. And here's the thing. That may not mean that you're going to have a community of 25 people. You may have 3 people. But rock with the 3 people that you got, though.
When you're doing something difficult, how do you know when you should quit or when you should keep going? Because we, the saying, don't ever quit, we like fundamentally disagree with that statement.
Yeah,
we
like
absolutely
the whole thing, winners
think that
winners don't quit,
things.
quitters, what is that? Winners never quit, quitters never win is just dumbest axiom ever. Here's the reason why. Winners quit the stuff they suck at all the time. They just do. Really good people just don't keep doing stuff they're not good at. So the way you do it is that it's what Seth Godin, who's a marketing expert, wrote a book called The Dip. And he says everyone goes through this where you start something and you ride the wave, right? So it's like when I was playing golf. So I used to play golf. And so then I was playing golf and I was actually getting good. This is what my son Jalen was like 2 or 3. And so I'm playing golf and all of a sudden I was like, man, for me to be good. So I got this dip. So and I'm out there and I'm very competitive. So I'm the dude like, man, I hit a bad shot. Like my clubs just wanted to like take a tour in the middle of the woods because I was chucking my clubs in the woods. But when I got myself to a point where I had to make a decision. Was I going to put in the effort and work to get better, or was it worth the time? And I realized at that time, like, it wasn't worth it. So I quit. So I haven't really played since then because it wasn't worth the time. I think you have to realize the things that you have to push through, is it helping you toward those things? Or and why? Do you have a chance to actually be good at it? And I just think you have to kind of go. You have to ask yourself, and here's the other thing, what season of life are you in? Some of you don't understand what season you're in, and so you want to do everything right now. Instead of realizing that, man, life is about seasons. There's no such thing. I don't believe in balance. I believe in seasons. In some seasons, things are going to be like where you're rocking in one area. Other seasons, it'll be a little bit more calmer. So I think you have to understand that is why the Bible actually talks a ton about understanding the seasons, because seasons change.
Who are some people that embody having a scoreboard and sticking to it super well?
Man, people who I know. I'll say this: like, there's a lot of people, like most of you guys won't know. Like, somebody's a hero of mine, Coach Barry Taylor. Coach Barry Taylor was a basketball coach. He's retired here. Coach Barry has one of the greatest scoreboards. He knows who he is. My man, I just want to help the next generation. That's all I want to do, and I want to golf. Honestly, that's all the dude does, literally. And he's cool. He could be done all these things. He's really, really good at that. I think that I would say somebody who had a really good scoreboard, and it was Kobe. Kobe had a really good scoreboard. Kobe's scoreboard was the idea of that he believed in design. He believed hard work, excellence in whatever you do. That's why you saw him go from being what he was in the basketball world to then coming right out of that and then winning an Oscar. Because the idea, it was crazy because everybody's like, I can't believe Kobe won an Oscar. What people don't realize, Kobe was writing those things when he was still playing. Like, he was writing like jingles like for companies. He was writing, Dear Basketball while he was still playing. And he wrote all these different things. So I think he was one of those guys who had an incredible scoreboard. So those are a couple, yeah. All right, so here we're going to ask whatever questions you want. There has to be nothing about this. Let's get into it. Let's ask questions. Remember, ask questions. Don't give your statements, political views, whatever. 20 seconds or less, ask your statement. All right, let's go.
So my question is, you didn't really talk about it, but like with sovereign themes and stuff, or like what God has put in you, what if like, can you speak on the what if you find out maybe the thing that you thought was your sovereign theme, the thing that God put in you isn't actually it, like you thought you were kind, but not really, you kind of just do nice things because you don't want to be alone kind of thing. How do you like pivot to be in a position where you actually can find out what God actually put into you, and B, what if you like actually are kind and maybe there's just a lot of dirt on top of it, like anxiety and all that stuff? How do you get all that dirt off so you can actually see what God wants to do with your sovereignty?
One of the most important things to exercise when practicing self-awareness, which is essentially what you do in order to discover the sovereign themes in your life, is curiosity and compassion. So for you to find out new information about who you are means that at one point you didn't go deep enough to discover it, but for whatever reason that was revealed now. So one of the first things that you can do is ask more curious questions about why it is. A lot of the times, let's use the example in terms of kindness. You can get this anxiety of like, oh my God, I'm not kind. I'm supposed to be kind. This is all facade. This is so fake. And that anxiety keeps you from being able to exercise curiosity with yourself, which is how you continue to ask yourself the deeper whys. So asking yourself things like, oh, what are some ways that I do kind actions when I'm actually mad? Who are some people that I find myself going out of my way to show kindness to? And it doesn't mean that those answers are always bad. You're just you're setting time aside to search for the deeper answer in hopes that it's going to be revealed to you. And a lot of the times the fear of what is going to be revealed will keep you from practicing the practice that you need to practice in order to become more authentic. And the thing is that if compassion is a true value of yours, it's going to speak no matter what it is that you find out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I'll be honest with you, one of the things for me was that, like, it's what Erwin McManus has this new book called Seven Frequencies, and one of the frequencies, my frequency, is a maven. And what that is that I help people, I bend people's reality. Sometimes I wouldn't bend people's reality because I want you to like me. And so it was that whole thing where I'm like, well, am I really this or am I not this, you know? And sometimes, and then I started questioning, am I even kind? Because I'm like, people are just pissed off at times. And I'm just like, I'm not trying to do that. But I realized the more healthy you get, the more you start to discover. And that's the beauty of life, man. The more you like peel the onion back, the more you discover yourself. And that's really cool. So.
Hi. So how do you balance the sorrow that comes with wisdom?
The sorrow that comes with wisdom?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why don't you answer that one?
That's a good question.
And the reason why I wanted her to answer the question, because I'm not just saying this because it like worked for me, but like I've been around a lot of people in my life and I've worked with a lot of people. I don't know if I've ever worked with somebody at her age with the level of wisdom she has. And it's a very like hard thing to get it. So I think that's why I wanted her to answer the question. So.
Well, my knee-jerk reaction when you asked the question was with wisdom. You balance the sorrow that comes with wisdom. I think that if you are wise, you understand the weight that you carry. You understand that there is a power to the words that you speak, the advice that you give, and that should never be taken lightly, because that means that when you're speaking to people, they will listen to what you say to them. And that means that one of the most powerful things that exist within the world that God has given us is the power of choice and the power to choose. When you're giving someone advice, whenever you're speaking to them, or even talking to yourself about wisdom, and people are listening to you and changing their actions, their directives, their motives based off of how you're guiding them, you should always do it in a way that helps them develop a greater understanding of themselves, a greater understanding of choice, so that you're not taking away from them the responsibility of their own life, even if that means that them doing the right thing would relieve you of sadness or would relieve you of fear, because you know what it means for the wrong decision to be made. Does that make sense?
So I think, what part did you get lost on?
The part where you started talking about other people and how once you said the thing about how someone doing the right thing would relieve you. And because I didn't misunderstand that, but the understanding like flew by my head, so it was hard to catch on to the rest of it.
Yeah, so one of the practical applications of being wise is advisory. So giving advice to people that typically tracks with what is the right thing to do. And where I was going with that is that oftentimes when you know how the wrong thing can impact somebody, you can overly hold their decisions and their responsibilities and try to dictate them in a direction that is wise, because it will relieve you of seeing them fail. It will relieve you of the sorrow that comes with knowing what poor decisions or good decisions lead to. And so you have to be very mindful as to not give advice based off of relieving yourself from your own sadness or your own anger or your own sorrow, especially whenever it's somebody that you care about.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome? You know, like you're doing everything right and you still feel like you're not good enough or you're not meant for whatever you're doing?
Yes, every week. Every week, like every week. Every week I feel that way. Listen, I've been a parent for 19 years, and every week I feel that way as a parent. I have been doing the work that I've done, I've led a church for 11 years now, and I feel that way almost every Sunday I get on stage. I've had multiple businesses I started, and I've sat in rooms with a lot of people, and I feel that way. And so it's in those moments, though, it's very important to have to remind myself, actually, of who I am. Because what will end up happening when you live out of imposter syndrome, you start to that's when when you start thinking that, then you start living that. To where then you'll start trying to do something. Like an example would be you'll be in a room with someone and they're an expert at a certain thing, and all of a sudden you'll just start talking like you're an expert in that thing, and then you're like, when you go back, you're like, why did I say that? That was so dumb. But what I try to do is remind myself, because I do, when it comes to helping unlock people and helping do this, I don't think there's anybody, and I believe that I don't think there's anybody on this planet better than me. But let me tell you this, I've sat in rooms with people who've put together $4 billion deals on mergers and acquisitions. I have no idea. So when I sit in that room with them, I'm like, yeah, I just shake my head. Yeah. Like, I don't know.
We're like Googling terms on our phone.
Yeah, straight. Like, first M&A. Oh, mergers and acquisitions, got it, Because, in corporate America, all they use is all these different acronyms. I'm like, don't just say, stop telling me you're circling back or put a pin in it. Just tell me you ain't going to do it. You know what I mean? So, yeah, so I would tell you, you have to constantly remind yourself of actually who you are.
I guess so. My question is, does the scoreboard change and evolve over time, or should it just be steadfast your whole life? And then also, how long did it take for you to come up with your own scoreboard? Like, what's a realistic timeline for that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Naomi. I think so let me just say this, and I'm really glad you asked that. I think that when it comes to a scoreboard, so when I talked about unlocking authenticity, I think that's a long-term thing for me, right? But then I think there are seasonal things on the scoreboard, right? So I think right now you may have certain things but those seasonal wins for you or things should be tied to your main thing. You know what I'm saying? And so what I would tell you to do is right now in this season of life, what does it mean to actually what does it mean for you to feel like it means to win? You know what I'm saying? And that could just simply be man, for me to win, it's being more and more truthful. Okay, well, that could be a win for you right now. You say you're struggling with lying. Okay, that could be a thing. If you feel like right now, man, it's, for me to win right now, is to be willing to, because I know you being an artist, right? So it'd be well, what if it was for some people, you didn't like to share your art, right? Maybe a win for you on your scoreboard this season is willing to show people that this is what I'm doing. That's my win right now, because that's going to help you be more and more authentic kind of in that process and stuff like that. So that I would just say there's seasons. So now to answer you how long it took me a minute to get there to understand what my actual scoreboard was. But it was just a constant thing. But when I look back on it though, the one thing I can tell you about faith and what God did, God was guiding me in that scoreboard, even when I wasn't even aware of my scoreboard. He was guiding me in it, because a lot of my life was built around this idea of authenticity. So,
hey, so I'm in the beginning of my career in the sports industry, and I kind of been thinking about what's my next steps gonna be and stuff like that. So my first part of the question is how do I know when it's time for me to wrap up where I am and move on to the next thing? Because I've already been kind of thinking about what I want to do next. And then the second part is once I get to that point of knowing that God is okay, this season is over, it's time to go to the next one. How do I make the jump from one division in sports to the next, or from collegiate athletics to professional athletics?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I would think first of all, when you talk about one season ending, the next one beginning, what I would tell you is that I would, if you feel like it could be another season, I don't think there's ever anything wrong with putting feelers out for something new, and just see what happens. A lot of times you're I don't really know. There's just no feelers out there just to see. And then if something pops, all of a sudden you'd be oh man, now again, if you're, all of a sudden you may throw it out there, you get 5 opportunities, that's awesome. But a lot of times what can happen is that you may throw it out there and nothing. And you're okay, well then I'm gonna stay with what's in front of me. But then if you keep getting that urge, then you say, okay, then I may go actively start to look for something like that. I always tell people is that when you're in this season, you have to ask yourself, have you gotten everything that you need to get from here? Have you, and also not only what you've gotten, but have you given everything that you can? Because a lot of times you may get everything in the first year, but you haven't given everything that you have given to make that place better. I always tell people our place is better because you were there. And if they're not better because you're there, then I think you need to stay to a place until it's better because you're there. Now, again, yes, there's other things, administration, upper things that you may not have control over, but you say, but the things I do have control over, it's absolutely better because I'm here. When you start taking that jump from professional, it simply comes out to, it's just like how it is in sports. Only thing that changes from high school, college, and professional in actual sports is the speed. Same thing happens when you get to that level. In actual work, it's just the speed of things, meaning your ability to process information, your ability to get things done, the expectation to get things done. Because at a professional level, there's a lot of money that's tied to it, so they expect you to deliver and what you say you can do. And so you have to be willing to carry that responsibility and deliver, and you must be willing, depending on where you work for, be willing to work. I had one of my, a really good friend of mine actually is he's the executive vice president now for the Charlotte Hornets. And when he first started working, one thing is this: he was working. Right out of college, he was working. We used to talk about he worked about 70 to 80 hours a week. One point in time is in the month of December. I'll never forget this. He slept in his own bed one night. Because he was a scout. So he was traveling, and you would think this is glamorous, right? Because he was traveling in Europe, but it wasn't. He literally would go, fly. So it was more torturous because he would go from Paris to Milan. So you're like, oh man, going to Milan, Italy. I'm going to go, no, fly to Paris, Milan, a red eye, get there, change, sleep for a second, go to a gym at 3:00, watch the game, do his report, get on a flight, fly to the next city. And he did that for almost 30 straight days. The point of why I tell you that, if you want to work at that level, you better be ready to work. I want you to understand this. Please understand, you won't, that is the work. And I want to encourage, and this is not the question you asked, but it sets us up. I really want to encourage you guys that, if you want to be you can't expect to get the same results as somebody who's willing to put that time in. The world don't work like that. Because some of you want, man, I just only want to work 40 hours a week. There's nothing wrong with that. That is your scoreboard. And I think you should be happy with that. But also, then you can't be upset if somebody who's putting 70 hours has a bigger paycheck than you. You can't. Well, that's not fair. Well, fairness ended in the Garden of Eden. There's no such thing. So you have to be willing to work. So to answer your question, you want to take that pro jump, you just got to be ready to work. And you have to. Here's the other thing: you have to give sacrifices up. That's one thing as with Bri. One thing she told me one time, she was like, when we first started on this journey of building this company, she says, "Listen, I'm willing to sacrifice certain things in my 20s because I want to build something." And I've actually watched her sacrifice things right now in her 20s in order to build something in the future. And so that would be the other thing too. Depending on what you got to do, you got to be willing to know what you're willing to sacrifice and what you don't. But that's what happens when you get to that next level. So. Yes.
That was a good segue to my question, because my question was, how do you find a balance between being a good steward of your responsibilities and sacrificial living?
It's a great question. Give me a little bit more, if you can give me even maybe a practical example, because that'll help me answer your question more specific.
Yeah, so for example, you are a student and you have school to do, but then you also have a heart willing to serve and to help people, and you are aware of what an investment into other people could look like. So being able to find the balance between, okay, where is the cut mark between okay, there's only so much that I can do in certain spaces, there's only so much I can give in certain spaces, not because I don't want to, but because I have responsibilities that I need to deal with as well.
I think the first thing is that first and foremost for you, I think it's understanding the season of life that you're in right now, right? I think it's understanding the season. So the season you're in school right now, right? Because you're getting your master's, correct? That's a priority because you only have a certain time frame to do that. So I think you have to look at your life in these segments. So if that's one of your priorities, okay, how much time goes to that? And you're not selfish for doing that. That's actually the thing. But then you also have a servant's heart for things, right? To serve in different things. Okay, how much is realistic to be able to do that without compromising this? Okay? Then you have your own personal life, walk with God, all that stuff integrated. I think you have to start looking at your life in buckets and be able to say, okay, this is one of the most important seasons I'm in right now. You were here. That was why you came here. So you got to make sure that's taken care of first. then you build out, because you'll have plenty of time in your life to be able to invest in a lot of other people. You know what I mean? Because what will happen if you do what you need to do with this season of your life, hopefully it positions you to be able to start setting up the other parts of your life to eventually you will have even more freedom because of the financial financial place it puts you in, to then be able to do that. But you have to look at the long game. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you're like, man, I want to do it all right now, and I want to help, and then you feel the guilt of, well, I'm not serving, and so if I don't do that, then I hate people. Like, no, you have this responsibility right now, and learn how to play the long game. Does that make sense? Go from there. We have a question up there. Yep. Yeah, you've been waiting patiently, my man. Yeah, I'll answer. You can ask 2 questions if you want to. My dog been real patient up there.
Earlier, you had mentioned something about how impactful leaders. I might be messing up your quote, so you can.
You're good.
But you had said something about how the most impactful leaders, they're not necessarily focused on being the best, but they're focused on what they're capable of doing. So I remember you also said earlier about how, like, when you were playing basketball and you were playing with Michael Jordan, and you kind of like came to that conclusion that you weren't going to necessarily like be at that same level that Michael Jordan was at. Yeah. And I know for me personally, with my craft and like my art and everything, I set a lot of like goals for myself. Like, I want to be the best at this and I want to be the best at that. But like sometimes like I question like what's quote unquote realistic versus what's unrealistic. So how are you able to define what you are capable of?
No, that's great, man. That's a very thoughtful question. I would tell you this. I would tell you, man, run for the impossible first. Like, run for the impossible first. Don't start with that's one thing I want to encourage you. Your generation, there's a very interesting place that you guys are at sometimes. Because sometimes it's like I watch some of you and you're like, you don't want to believe, you believe for certain things, other things you don't. But like, man, I say run for the impossible, right? And then like let your work speak for it. Like, let the results tell you. I always tell people, the market will tell you how good you are. The market tells you. Like, I have a certain dollar amount I get paid per hour because the market dictates that. And so the market tells me I'm pretty good at what I do. So because people still pay it. I think for you, I would go out there and just, man, chase and run and go do it. And then from there, then evaluate it. Because now and here's the thing, you're going to keep getting better at it. I was at one of the peak parts in basketball. And I had enough self-awareness to look at Michael Jordan and realize, like, it was just not even a physical ability standpoint. I was a really good athlete, and I was looking at him. I'm like, this, like, it was literally like watching The Flash. I was like, this dude is like, he's a meta-human. And so I realized, like, there's just certain things that weren't there, and so on and so forth. So I would tell you to run after it until you get to a point to where you do hit that, like, then you go back and reevaluate. But yeah, man, chase the impossible first. So, Sammy? Oh, yeah, you got another question. Yeah, you got another. Go for it. My bad.
It's kind of a 2-part question.
Okay, cool.
All right. What does your daily routine look like? And also, what are some of your favorite books?
Favorite quotes or books?
Favorite books. Okay.
I will start with favorite books. Let Your Life Speak, Parker J. Palmer, 100%. And what's really cool about that, he's an 85-year-old man, and his single book changed my life. And my assistant LaVon is over here actually reached out to him on my behalf, and he emailed back. And so I'm actually going to go spend time with him in November. And I'm like, literally, it's like, to me, I'm fanboying, like when I met Michael Jordan. I'm like, dude, like this like 85-year-old white man, like little white man. I'm like, dude, because his book changed my life. Let Your Life Speak. Leadership on the Line is another incredible book. It's a really raw look at leadership. I would say, trying to think of other books. There's another book I would tell you that's really good is I just got done with the biography of Steve Jobs. It's really, really good. It's a great audio listen. Another great audio listen is Will Smith's memoir.
Phenomenal.
Will Smith's memoir is the best
recommend
I've ever. Yeah.
Everybody should listen to it.
Yeah,
on
Will Smith's
audiobook.
memoir is the absolute best I've ever heard, as far as like in a memoir and the design around that. So those are a few. I've got some other ones. Literally, if you come grab me, I can look at my phone and just show you all the stuff there. I would say, as far as your question, routine, that's actually changed recently. It's changed recently because I began to do this thing of like, what is like this whole project, the future self? What is the next 10? Where do I want to be in 10 years? And work your way backwards. So my routine is this. I'm usually now, if my, that's what you guys rewire my body. If my body feels up to it, usually like this morning, I was up at 5:30. I was up 5:30. I listen, I go 5:30. I listen and like kind of read and listen to like a couple chapters of the Bible. Then what I do like meditation, breath work, stuff like that. And then I go into, after that, I do like deep learning. I'm trying to learn on a craft. So right now I'm learning on this idea of high performance. So I literally, like this morning, I spent like an hour just studying that. Then I plan my day out. And then after I plan my day out, I go into what I call deep work if I got to get something done. So today I had to work on a project. I did that. Like tomorrow, I spend most of Tuesdays working on anything I'm going to speak about. So I'll just kind of dive into doing that. And then, man, I'll do that for like an hour and a half. Then you just take breaks and things like that in between. And so just doing that. If I have meetings and stuff like that. And then I try to get some level of, at some point in time, some level of a workout or some way where I'm actually doing something difficult. One thing, man, that, shout out to my wife. She's amazing. But one of the things that she told me, she's like, you're just a nicer person when you play video games. So she was like, I give you freedom to play video games every day. I'm like, what? I'm like, say less. So literally right now, I've been on college football. I have NBA 2K. I haven't even touched 2K that much. I've been playing college football the entire time. I literally went on a 20-year dynasty. But anyway, I'm playing college football, so I do that for a little bit. And then a lot of times, I'll read more, hang out with my friends, do stuff like that, call stuff like that. But it's kind of, if we have client work, it just kind of always goes from there.
Something that I'll add to that too is that we're a little bit more type B in terms of our schedule, and we kind of live in a world where it's like morning routine, nighttime routine, sauna, cold plunge. Like we're getting all of these things that we should be adding to our routine that our morning and nighttime routine would sum up to like 10 hours. And so we typically move a little bit more like rhythms, which works a lot more for people who especially are artists and think a little bit more like feeling and flowing. We'll kind of have more themes for the day throughout the week that we'll focus on. So maybe one day it's like high level thinking. We make sure that we don't get into the nitty gritty. Maybe one day it's just straight grind. We're like knocking out all of our meetings, all of our more detailed work. We do things on Fridays like Future Forward, where we just take an hour and you can do anything with that time. The first thing that comes to your mind that's creative, that it would help you out, that's kind of what we prioritize the time for. So we definitely move a little bit more off of rhythms than we do routines for the most part.
Yeah, sweet. Appreciate it. Sammy, last one.
Good evening, Pastor, Bri. How you guys doing? I had a question for Bri, actually. I wanted to return to the question that he had asked about knowing your limits and when to say yes and no to certain things. And Pastor Adrian, you had said that you've watched her sacrifice a lot of things to get to where she wants to be for her future. And so, Bri, my question is, in like society where a lot of young people are pressured to work harder and to like be perfect in what they do, how have you dealt with the anxiety of sacrificing things?
Something that I feel like I learned really early on in the process, because I was 19 when I first started working for Adrian. I actually was going to school. I dropped out of school because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then it was around 2020, and he was like, let's start this consulting firm. And our first client was a Fortune 500 company with over 12,000 employees all over the globe. And we're pulling off like high-level executive events. I had no idea what I was doing, but we didn't. But we, figured it out along the way. And something that I learned through that time, because like he mentioned the sacrifice and the commitment, was that I had to be willing to believe that God would restore time. And that is something that I feel like with that sacrifice and going through the process has become such a huge foundation and like fabric of my being, and what I can trust God with as well, because I set aside, so many relationships, like social outings, like all the way down to social media. Like I did not have time to scroll on social media throughout the day because we were just straight in the grind. And what I learned was that when I committed to something that was in my hands and I basically limited everything else, I had to remove the possibilities from my mind that there was something else that I could be doing that would be better. I had to have very strong internal frameworks down to when I get home at the end of the night, I have to look myself in the mirror and be like, this is what you need to focus on right now. Like it just took a huge relentlessness and resilience to remind myself of it. Because what I believed was, if I am faithful, God is going to restore whatever it is that I have fear that I could lose within this process. And I can say 1,000% that has happened tenfold. I have just crazy opportunities, the ability to connect and interact with some really awesome people. My friendships are at the best place that they could ever be. So that's what I would say for one, is that God restores time.
Yeah. And what I would say as we close is that, Sammy, I think, and the reason why I've known Sammy since he was born, so just so I know how old I am. But the one thing is that's a moment, that's an act of faith. People think faith is just this, there's nothing out there and I'm believing for this thing I don't have. No, when you actually give something up and you're willing to sow that and sacrifice it, that's an act of faith, of that you're believing that I'm sowing and sacrificing this time. And as I sow and sacrifice this time, here's what sowing and sacrifice this time is going to do in that process. So I think it's one of the greatest acts of faith, and I can honestly attest to that. I've watched her. I've actually watched her do it, and we were just out there on the grind trying to figure out what this thing looked like, and now, we've been very fortunate to, close to building, a 7-figure company over the last 3 years, and and it was just us, and we just kind of other people have been added to that group as we've been building it out. So man. So whatever it is in front of you, I encourage you guys. Like right now at this age that you're at, just make sacrifices right now. What I want you to do is this: think about 10 years from now. What would you want to see? And start working to be that person, and what do you need to do to get there? What do you have to do right now? And start living that way right now. That's an act of faith. I believe you prepare to the level of your faith. And I think that for many of you, that is what you feel like God's called you to start preparing right now for what that looks like. So that being said, we appreciate you guys so much. Hey, and so I need to do the closeout, right?
Yeah, we got to do the closeout.
All right. Well, guys, we hope today's podcast was actually helpful for you. Until next time, keep writing the rules.
Boom.